Barrett is a highly skilled movement specialist with over 10 years of experience in the field of health, wellness, fitness, and performance. His expertise lies specifically in brain-based fitness and functional neurology, making him a sought-after professional in his field. Barrett's dedication and passion for helping individuals achieve their optimal physical and cognitive abilities are evident through his impressive list of accomplishments. With 14 certifications under his belt, Barrett possesses a comprehensive and in-depth understanding of movement and performance. His expertise and commitment to ongoing education ensure that he stays at the cutting edge of the latest research and practices in the field. Whether he's working with clients to improve athletic performance or helping individuals improve neurological conditions, Barrett's knowledge and skills make him a valuable asset to anyone seeking to enhance their overall well-being. So first of
Nice.
all, Barrett, I appreciate you for being here. I don't know why my screen's so dark. Yeah, thank you for taking the time out of your day to be here. Really appreciate it. And I think everybody listening is going to get a lot of value from you and your expertise. So without further ado, you view movement through a neural lens, clearly, which many people listening may not be familiar with. So could you explain how neurology influences and allows us to move?
Yeah, absolutely. So the first thing, like to kind of get the understanding is we're all neurologists, whether we know it or not. If you're moving, you're a neurologist because understanding that that 3 pounds of jelly that sits in your skull controls legitimately 100% of everything in our body, from how we move to how we perform and even how we feel and how we have emotional response to stuff. You can legitimately put the word neuro in front of just about everything, and it's actually true. So if it's coming from pain, if it's coming from movement, if it's coming from tight muscles, et cetera, you can literally put the word neuro in front of it because our brain is the one that is controlling everything and anything in our body.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I just think like obviously you've had a lot of education on the topic of neuro, but it's something that we can't really get a physical grasp on. So I think a lot of times it can be hard for people to understand that there is a neural component, but if you do know it's there, there's a lot you can do with it.
Mm-hmm.
Because like you said, it dictates everything. Um, so the first time seeing a client, and maybe they're expressing some symptomology or they have some type of goal. What's your approach and how do you start the initial movement assessment?
So pretty much how I start with anybody that I'm working with brand new is I actually have a questionnaire that I take people through. It consists of about, I want to say like 100 and something questions, and it's pretty much kind of like a in-depth understanding of their brain, what's going on in their life. Like I pretty much tell people from day one, I want to know whenever you were born to the day that you walked in, what has happened in your life, from injuries to scars to tattoos to emotional damages, all sorts of stuff. And basically, I take them through a questionnaire of like yes, no kind of questions. And if they say yes, just kind of going in depth about those kinds of things. And then what those questions do is it kind of hones my skill to where I can kind of be more biased to say, hey, we might need to work on these brain areas compared to others that could possibly be helping with what their goals actually are. So I take them through a questionnaire, kind of get to know them personally and kind of stuff that's happened in their life. And then from there, my movement screening is I normally like to take them through a cerebellum evaluation. So if you don't know what the cerebellum is, if you look at the two big hemispheres of our brain, it's that little thing that sits underneath right by the spinal cord. It's very, very metabolic. It's very in tune with the ABCs, accuracy, balance, and coordination. It deals with a lot of movement components. So I normally take them through an evaluation of that area and also possibly looking at different brain structures within the brainstem because a lot of things that can happen within the brainstem can be malfunction or not want to say malfunction, but could possibly be someone area that we might want to look at. I also take them through if I really want to get super in depth with it. I could take them through a cranial nerve evaluation to kind of see if we can utilize looking at actual structures of the brainstem, like, hey, maybe their midbrain might be need a little bit more activation or their pons or their medulla. and then basically utilize those as stacking tools to make them perform even better than what they were before. So if you understand how kind of like the brainstem works, we have three different areas. We have the mesencephalon or midbrain, we have the pons, and then we have the medulla. The mesencephalon and the medulla deal with more flexion activation, to whereas the pons deals with more extensor activation along with the cerebellum. So if they might be having postural issues, we might need to look at those areas, looking at the actual structures that uh, control the tones of flexion and extension tones of our body, and then so forth and so forth. Those are kind of a quick little evaluation. Until I really do it in person with somebody, it's kind of hard to kind of explain. But yeah, that's pretty much the
Hmm.
gist of it. Is I'll normally take them through a questionnaire, and then I take them through pretty much a cerebellum evaluation, and then if we get down and dirty with it, taking them through a cranial nerve evaluation.
Wow. So you clearly have a very in-depth understanding of neurology in the brain. For
Just a little
people
bit.
for people listening though, I think that's just so like you're so advanced that like maybe could you do like a mini assessment for me just so we can get some type of picture as to how maybe the brain interacts with body parts?
Yeah, absolutely. So, like one of the
Okay.
evaluations that I normally like to do with people, like the cerebellum evaluation, if we look at how the cerebellum works, it deals with accuracy, balance, and coordination. So, a lot of times I'll take people through a balance evaluation, a accuracy evaluation, and then a coordination evaluation. So, here I'm going to have you do one that's very, very simple.
Okay.
That's very, very fun to do. So, you're going
Hmm.
to take your hands like so, and I want you to think about index leads, bringing your fingers together and then spreading them as part away from each other as fast as you can for about 5 seconds. And then immediately after, you're going to reverse it to where the pinky goes in and follows all the way to the index. So basically, you would do index leads, fingers coming in as fast as you can, and then you do pinky leads all the way in. So this is a lateral cerebellum exercise. So we
Okay.
have three different areas of the cerebellum. Well, we have a few more, but to keep it simple, we have the midline cerebellum. Think the midline of your body. We
Uh-huh.
have the intermedial cerebellum. Think of like a little bit more distal joints. So maybe shoulders, a little bit of elbows, hips, a little bit of knees. And then we
Okay.
have lateral cerebellum. Think about the periphery, kind of more of the proximal joints. So basically, like your fingers, your wrists, your ankles, and your toes.
Hmm.
So testing fingers, we are testing more of the lateral cerebellum. And this is actually a big area of our cerebellum because if you think about it, our hands, we have to be very minute with how we move and how we do stuff. So our
Hmm.
hands play a big part in the lateral cerebellum.
Hmm.
So yeah.
Awesome. Awesome.
That's
What
a
what
quick little evaluation that I normally do. I have them do some other stuff too, but that's a simple one that's easy to do on, on screen kind of thing.
okay. So I forget what book I was reading. I think it was Stuart Brown on play, but he he gave the analogy of play it, as it has the ability to light up the brain like a Christmas tree.
Mhm.
So when you're doing all these different cerebellum examinations and talking about the different regions, is that what you're doing? You're lighting up parts of the brain that maybe are a little bit dim.
Yes,
You
that
know
I
what
mean
I'm
that's
saying?
one of the things. Yeah, that's
Okay.
absolutely. So like
Okay.
one of the things is understanding that sometimes people need activation, like of certain areas, but sometimes
Yeah.
they actually need inhibition of other areas as well.
Hmm.
So not only do I work with activating, but also inhibiting as well. So
Hmm.
like inhibiting being like, okay, if we look at sensory, for example, like hearing, all right, well, let's plug one ear and kind of block that because maybe one side of the cortex is too powerful, needs to be dumbed down. I don't want to say dumbed down, but dimmed down, should I say, while
Hmm.
the other one gets upregulated to where they're more even.
Hmm.
So looking at stuff where you can do activation. So like if we're sitting here just working on this, we are activating our lateral cerebellum. But if you actually look at it, we are not only just activating our lateral cerebellum by doing this, we are also activating the frontal lobe of the cortex because that deals with voluntary movement. So we're activating a couple different parts. And then there's also a huge kind of like different spinal tracts that go through and back and forth and stuff like that. Because we have ascending and descending spinal tracts. So you
Mhm.
can also test those things out. I know that sounds kind of crazy, but think about this. We're moving our hands. Like we all know if we move our right, if I move my left hand here, we all know it comes from the contralateral or opposite side cortex. That is 100% right. Now, as I'm moving this hand, my frontal lobe is making the motion happen. The cerebellum on the same side is basically saying, hey, frontal lobe, you're doing this right. Or, hey, frontal lobe, you're not doing it right. Hey, here's like correct it. And the frontal lobe
Mhm.
goes, okay, let's make that correction. So, yes, are we activating different areas? Yes, we are turning stuff on. Now, sometimes if, like, say, if I were to do this and all of a sudden you get to about 3 seconds, then it's like, we might need to work on either some endurance stuff. We might need to do some more speed stuff. We might need to do some more accuracy stuff. So like if I'm sitting here going, okay, I'm good, I'm good, I'm good. Oh, it's kind of lacking a little bit. We might need to look at activating more lateral cerebellum on that same side. Or does somebody need more activation of the frontal lobe on the opposite side to make this motion a little bit better?
Mhm.
That makes sense.
Yeah. And
So
that's
it's kind of like an in-depth like, and then you can kind of get minute with everything, but like to keep it simple, like think frontal lobe, cerebellum makes this action happen, kind of thing.
and that was really interesting what you're saying about sometimes you got to turn stuff up and other times you got to turn it down. And I think there's a common misconception in training that we need to have the same amount of reps in on both sides in drills to achieve symmetry. But in reality, that what you're saying is just because you do 10 lunges on both sides doesn't mean your brain is operating symmetrically.
Mhm.
So
That,
yeah,
that's
so
100% right.
yeah, that's really fascinating. So you're really like you do you view people like puzzles? Because you have all these tools where you know how stuff fires and wires and you can navigate and get
Yeah,
stuff popping.
it can be kind of a pain in the butt sometimes, but yeah,
Yeah.
there'll be times that I'm working with people and I'll have ideas of what we could possibly work on. And we get into it and it's just like, I might as well just throw this out the window. Like I have no like there's some days that I'm like, I have no idea what your brain wants. We're just gonna play around and figure it out.
Mhm.
But yeah, like I mean, you're like the whole concept of say I do 10 curls on this arm, and then I have to do 10 curls on this arm as well because we want symmetry. That's completely false. That is not how our brain is wired.
Mhm.
Now, if like somebody's having, say, they need activation on this side, if my left side needs to be activated, but if I were to activate my right side, it actually breaks me or makes me worse. I might have people work, okay, I only want you to work out this arm. I don't really care about this arm because this arm makes you worse. This arm makes you better. I've had workouts on myself that I've only worked out my left leg because that's what my brain wanted that day or that week or that month or however long. So you have to kind of know the ways to kind of like see the signals or see the signs that, hey, we need to work on only one side compared to the other. And there's tests that I do to kind of figure those things out. Like that cranial nerve evaluation is a big indicator of it, and some other ones that we can possibly look at saying, oh, you might have these stuff going on that we need to only work the opposite side of the body of what's going on this on the side that you're having problems with because of how the brain is wired and how stuff works.
Mhm. Awesome. So I was looking on your Instagram and I saw that a lot of your testimonials are praising you on your ability to relieve pain. So could you explain how the brain and nervous system influences and manifests pain?
Yes, absolutely. So our brain does, here's like the easiest kind of understanding what our brain actually does. Our brain does three things. It takes in inputs, if that's a sensory input, so like seeing something, hearing something, tasting something, smelling something, or if it's a movement input, so actually moving, or is it an internal input? It interprets those inputs It compares it with other inputs. So like your eyes and your ears are comparing together. So it interprets this input and it creates an output. Now, pain is an output. It is a protective output. So if we look at something like pain, for example, without like going too crazy into like the neurology behind pain, in a nutshell, the pain does not exist in the periphery. It exists in the brain. So basically what I'm saying is pain is all in your head. It is 100% all in your head, but pain is very individualized and it's very like personable. So don't like freak out and say like, oh, it's all in my head. It's all in my head. It's like, well, yeah, technically it is because you could have structural damage and not experience any pain. And you can
Mhm.
experience pain and not have any structural damage. There's no correlation between the two, really. Like,
Mhm.
yes, most of the time, like, yes, you actually like tear a meniscus, your brain will let you know. But when it comes to pain, pain is a protective output. It is a way of basically getting you to calm things down. So if you were to picture your brain as a bucket, and all these different stressors are going into this bucket. Now, like basically, like poor sleep goes into this bucket. You got in a fight with your significant other that goes in your bucket. You're having a hard time, you have stress with the job that goes in this bucket. Now, at the top of this bucket, there's a little spout.
Mhm.
And if before we spill over of this bucket, your brain is going to open up that spout and release some of that stress out. And most of the time, it does it as pain. Now, it can also do other things. So, like if you suffer from headaches, suffer from bipolarism, dyslexia, ADD, insert like mental elements here, that is all outputs. So, if somebody's experiencing pain or experiencing, say, some kind of output problem, could it be a sensory input or an input problem? Yes. Could it be an interpretation problem? Yes. Could it actually be an output problem? Yes. So you have to find within those three categories what is causing that output to happen. So if somebody's like the big one that I'm seeing a lot nowadays, like in just like the fitness realm, is people getting on TRT, people doing
Uh,
hormonal replacement therapy,
yeah.
understanding that a lack of hormones is a output problem. So they are doing something, either that's an input problem or interpretation problem, to cause those outputs to happen. So when it comes to pain, I can give you like examples of people that I've worked with in the past, but most of the time, just changing, say, an input or changing an interpretation causes that output to subside and to go away.
Mhm. That's pretty fascinating. And is that why your like intake form, your assessment is so in depth because you're really trying to collect all those things that go in that bucket,
Mhm.
which could potentially fill it up and manifest as pain? Is that part of the
Yes.
reason?
100%. So like instead of being like, think of like a dartboard and
Yeah.
the bullseye is what we need to do in order to make you like get you out of pain or get you out of whatever you're wanting to work on. And if I just don't do that what questionnaire, I'm just basically taking a shotgun and shooting that bullseye. And it's like, will I hit it? Maybe,
Mhm.
but I'm most likely going to hit around everywhere else besides, that bullseye. To whereas if I take them through this questionnaire of kind of understanding, hey, I see that these areas might be issues that we might need to address or look at, I can be more like a sniper and hit it like bullseye on the head. Now, does that happen every time? No, because the human body, the human brain is so complex. But I can get a little bit more accurate by taking them through these questions and say, hey, I see that you keep on saying yes to these areas and no's to these. I'm probably going to be more biased to those areas that you said yes to, kind of thing.
That's awesome.
Hmm.
So you work with all types of patients, um, from athletes to people with neurological disorders. So what insights have you gained from working with people who have neurological conditions, and is there carryover to when you work with athletes?
Yeah, 100%. Because it's all, if you look at them, if you look at what I said in the beginning, what controls everything? It is your brain. Your
Mhm.
nervous system controls everything in your body. If that is pain management, stress management, if that is, I want to get bigger, faster, stronger, well, what controls all those things? It's your brain. So if you look at it, there's two kind of avenues, like there's two different jobs our brain really does. Yes, it does those three things: input, interpretation, outputs, but it has the number one goal of our brain is survival. It wants to live every minute, every hour, every day, every second, you name it, this. Now, its next goal or its next job is basically kind of performance or movement. So you can think of movement is the currency of your nervous system. The
Uh,
more your brain trusts you from a survival aspect, the more it's going to allow you to do. That's why whenever you look at, say, somebody who has suffered, or like say, take a Olympic athlete, they have they are top tier, top notch, all of that stuff. Like they are the cream of the crop. If you look at how they move, they are incredible movers because they have built trust with their nervous system from pretty much day one. To whereas if you take somebody off the street who has never moved, like say like a barbell squat, a bench press, whatever, they've never done that. Are they going to be as good as that Olympic athlete? No, because they are having to think of this more of a survival aspect first. And then as the brain gets more and more comfortable with these new movements, so that currency is going to go up and your brain's going to go, hey, I feel more safe. I'll allow you to do more things. So if you look at like strength training, for example, a lot of times when it comes to strength training and like powerlifting, bodybuilding, all that kind of stuff, the first things that you notice is you've gotten stronger. It's
mhm,
not from the muscle bellies getting stronger. It's not anything like that. It is better wiring of the nervous system to those muscle fibers. So those motor units are firing better. So that way they're able to contract the muscle better.
mhm.
Like if we were able to contract our muscles at 100%, we would break bones. Like there like powerlifters probably generate, I think it's around like 70 to 80% of their actual like muscle contraction potential, towards the average person is only really utilizing maybe 30% of that.
Mhm.
But that's because your brain doesn't trust you to do 100% because you will legitimately break yourself. So that's like why you hear like grandmas or mothers picking cars off of their kids if they fall over. And like they're like, that's amazing, that's superhuman strength. But then you don't realize afterwards that mom or grandma is probably going to the hospital with herniations, broken bones, all
Yeah.
sorts of things that you don't realize.
Mhm.
Um, but so if we think about it, like we have two jobs, we have survival, number one, foremost. It wants to survive every single day. I don't care who you are or what you do, it is survival one, movement second. The more your brain trusts you with movement, the more it's going to allow you to do. So think of movement as the currency. So whenever I work with somebody, if that is an athlete, if that is a person that has suffered some kind of brain injury or whatever, most of the time, like I just get them comfortable with movement again. Like, is that as weird as that sounds? It's literally like whenever I'm working with, I used to work with a lot of baseball players. I just taught them how to move. Like it wasn't anything really too kind of crazily special, but within like I had some kids within as little as a month, they would improve their agility times by over a second. And it was literally just saying, hey, do this, this, and this whenever you're pivoting, planting, all that kind of stuff. Their brain trusts them to be, okay, I trust you with this motion. I'm going to allow you to get faster.
Mhm.
So a lot of times when it comes to a lot of things, it's all about just building trust with your nervous system.
Mhm. Yeah, that's fascinating with the strength and speed, and really good coaching seems to be about threat reduction.
Mhm. It,
Um,
it honestly is 100% a lot of threat reduction.
mhm. And it also speaks to specificity, right?
Mhm.
Like getting strength is very specific. And also, like you said, like you're teaching those baseball players to get in those specific positions, and then their brain got kind of inoculated, and it allowed them to move faster because the threat was reduced.
Mhm. And
Yeah.
that's so like you got to think of it. It's always survival first, no matter who you are.
Hmm.
Like so, like think like autonomics, like blood pressure, heart rate, all that kind of stuff. And then movement is always going to be second.
Hmm.
So if you're trying to get somebody to move better, sometimes you might have to. Most of the time, you're going to have to reduce that threat. Once you reduce that threat, that currency goes up to where you're actually moving better without like me being like, oh, you got to lunge this way, you got to squat this way, you can do a bench press, whatever. Just building that trust is really what it is.
Yeah, it's interesting too, this neurological lens for coaching and viewing movement, because like like when I was growing up, all I heard I played basketball and I all I heard was you just gotta work harder, like no pain, no gain. But the reality is it's KNOW pain, no gain,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, because if you introduce too much, your brain won't accept it. So it's about like almost dosing yourself
Mhm.
like a doctor would
You
with
got to think of it as like there's something called the minimal effective dose.
mm,
So if you look at
mhm,
like the bell curve, like or you have a natural bell curve that goes up and eventually comes back down, is as a coach, as a trainer, as a whatever, if you're working with athletics, if you're working with general population, you're trying to get that right at the tip of the bell curve. So we're looking at that minimal effective dose. Now, could that be, hey, you do one rep of an eye exercise or an inner ear exercise or a movement exercise and you feel so much better? You've already hit that. If you did 2 reps, you're going to be down here and you're going to be throwing up, nauseous, not feeling good.
yeah.
Like, I hurt. So it could be that, or it could be, okay, you have to do 50 or 100 reps of something in order to get that minimal effective dose before you hit, your plateau and you come back down.
Hmm.
So as a coach, as a trainer, as a movement guy, I'm always trying to figure out what is that minimal effective dose. I've had people in the past that have come to me for pain that we literally did one thing out of pain, gone, never came back. I've had
Wow.
people in the past where it's like they've been in pain and it took us, I have a powerlifter that I work with, and it took us 6 months to get her out of pain because every human body, every human nervous system is different from one another.
Hmm.
So it's kind of a pain sometimes, like not like it's just a pain in the butt.
No
Um,
pun intended.
no pun intended, right? Yeah. It can be a pain, but also very, very rewarding whenever you get somebody out of pain, you get somebody moving better, they're able to lift the weights or whatever they want to do. If that's weight loss, if that's muscle building, if that's just being able to move, that's a great kind of whenever you see it become reality for them kind of
Mhm.
thing.
Yeah. That's how do you I guess as a coach it's difficult. It's different when you're working out yourself, but I'm sure some people like just automatically push themselves very hard. Other people you need to push themselves a little bit. So how do you balance that act? Like for example, myself, I was working out the other day and I was doing some kettlebell squats at speed. And at the end range, like on the down, I hurt my back a little bit. But it's like if I'm not exploring, like I feel like sometimes I plateau and sometimes it's okay to go there just to see where it is and then come back. Like I'm
Mm.
like now I've worked on reducing the threat, taking myself through some mobility and breathing, and I do some neuro drills, but I don't know all the ins and outs like you do, but I know the basic ones. And I've brought my threat down, but now I'm gonna start slowly, slowly ramping it up. So how do you balance that? Like if someone has a goal, you want to brick by brick help them lay that foundation in order to achieve it. Um, but sometimes you give them a little bit bigger of a dose just to see if they can tolerate it. You know what I'm saying? Like just to know you can go there. Like sometimes you need a little bit of Goggins. You know what I'm saying? But not all the time. Sometimes you got
Yeah.
to bring it down. Yeah.
Yeah. Like most of the time, whenever I'm working with people, it's all about like as weird as it sounds, it's like you got to test things. You got to
Mhm.
figure this stuff out. Like
Yeah.
I'm not just working with somebody like, yes, I've been doing this for going on like 11 years, working with people and helping people out. But at the same time, it's like you still kind of have to push the barrier because how do you create those adaptations is pushing it just a little bit. Now, I'm not like I've worked on, for a prime example, is my wife. The first time I was really learning about like the visual system and like what it really does, I was kind of like having her do some stuff just to kind of see. And she literally, like, I like, pardon my French here, but like shit you not. She literally just like I had her do like a vision drill and she just started crying. Like just started "Ah!" and I was like, okay, pushed it too much. Sorry, kind of thing. But sometimes you do have to like kind of like test those boundaries.
Mhm.
It depends on the population that you're working with. Like if I'm working with an athlete, if I'm working for somebody who's like they have to be in stressful situations, I'm going to be probably a little bit more intense with them because they got to get used to being in those kind of intense threat positions. Okay. Baseball players, for example, like I have pretty background when it comes to baseball. It's like, okay, what is a good batting record in the MLB? 200. So that basically means they have put the ball into play two times out of 10.
Yeah.
So, like, just by doing that, if we're working on hitting or something, I want, like, we've had teams in the past, like we've purposely been like, I want you to heckle the living daylights out of your teammate while they're up at bat. They have to get used to that pressure. I want you to talk the most garbage, the most, like, insult them because they have to get comfortable with going, okay, I know what's going on around me, but I can shut that out and still focus on what's going on.
Hmm.
So sometimes, like when it comes to the end of it, when it comes to that, pushing the barrier, it depends on the individual. If it's an athlete, I'm probably going to be a little bit more reckless with them because of whatever sport they're playing and what they have to get accustomed to.
Hmm.
Now, if I'm working with somebody who's coming up with like, having pain or having some kind of mental ailments, I'll probably lack it off just a little bit, like kind of bring it down just a little bit. But I'm still going to push those barriers because if you look at neuroplasticity, you sometimes have to do the reps. You have to push it in order to make that brain really pay attention and adapt to whatever stimulus is provided
Hmm.
kind of aspect. So sometimes you have to push the barrier with just about any population. Now, I'm not saying go 0 to 100 with somebody every single time. I'm saying maybe, 10, 20, 30. Okay, 30 is about what we're going to get today. Next week, we'll get to 60 or something like that.
Hmm.
Um, Increase the dose as you go. Because once again, that bell curve, we don't want to hit that top part to where they crash kind of
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah. That's really an art of coaching. And that just I feel like that's something that just takes time and the amount of bodies you've worked with and people you've interacted with. Um, so we talked a lot about working with other people and clients and patients. But what does a workout for you look like? Do you have specific goals? Are you experimenting? Is it playful? Could you just
Oh
elaborate a
yeah.
little bit?
So like my personal training uh method is, honestly, tell you the truth, right now I'm starting to get back into running because I'm starting to kind of enjoy running again. I kind of go through like waves when it comes to running. I'm like, I love it, I hate it, I love it, I hate it, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of getting more into running again. But like one thing that I like to do, like I still do the traditional stuff like squats, bench press, like all the those kinds of things. But what I like to do is explore movement. Now, like what I mean by that is, okay, let's take a push up, for example. All right, you can do a normal push up all day long. Well, all right, well, let's try it. Let's do it with like maybe one hand turned in. So we have an internal rotation and the other one has an external rotation. All right, let's try
Hmm.
that. All right, now let's do the same thing. Let's add a lateral flexion to it. Now do a push up. All right, I'm going to hold this position, eyes to the left, do a push up, eyes up, do a push up. All right, my head is up and over to the side and do a push up.
Mm.
You can turn one exercise into a million different exercises. So you can play around with that because if you've done a push up, like a normal push up, you've done hundreds of thousands of reps of a push up, your brain's not really going to pay attention to it. It's going to go, okay, yeah, sure, we've got this, do it, kind of thing.
Yeah.
But then if you start adding novelty to it, to where it's, okay, hey, I'm going to do it a different hand position, different stance, wide, narrow, close, whatever. Or if I do different eye positions or different head positions while doing a push up, or I'm doing a vision drill while I'm doing a push up, now all of a sudden my brain is going, hey, what are you doing? Hang on, I got to pay attention to this. And by doing that, you're creating more of that plasticity, that neuroplasticity, or that brain change. So thinking about survival first, it is more comfortable with these motions. So the likelihood of injuries to happen whenever you move go down.
Hmm.
Performance goes up, injuries go down.
Hmm.
So whenever I say explore movements, this is the same thing like lunge series. Do a forward lunge, do an anterior forward lunge, do a lateral lunge. Now do all those same lunges, do different feet position. Do it on the ball of foot. Do it with an internal rotation of the foot, external rotation of the foot. All right, now do the same thing, an internal rotation from the hip, external rotation from the hip. You can do that. You can play around with different trunk positions while lunging. Now,
Hmm.
these are kind of like extremes, but if you are exploring 360 degrees of movement, your body becomes more aware of it, or your brain becomes more aware of it. So it's more comfortable with movement. So that way the threat comes down. And now that movement currency comes up. So now it's trusting you with more things. Now all of a sudden you're going to go play basketball. You go up to like do a layup and you're like, holy crap, I'm actually jumping a few inches higher to
Yeah.
I can probably actually dunk now,
Hmm.
kind of. And you didn't even train any kind of plyometrics.
Hmm.
It's all about getting more and more comfortable with just movement. So exploring stuff. Now,
Yeah.
like on my page on Instagram, it's like all over the place. Like I do vision drills, I do vestibular drills, I do movement drills, I do all sorts of stuff, but I'm stacking those within different movement components. So I'm not just sitting here going, okay, let's do a vision drill and then work out. No, I want to incorporate those things so it makes my brain more plastic. So basically more better change
Hmm.
thing.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I know I commented on one of your videos. I was asking about the applicability of one of the drills you were doing. It was like a squat, and then you were I forget you were naming something, but could you just talk about multitasking and how that translates to life and athleticism?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you look at like dual tasking, understand that we do dual tasking every day of our life with if we realize it or not. Imagine you're driving to work one day. You get a phone call, you have it on your Bluetooth, you click answer. Understanding that that is dual tasking. You're communicating, you're driving, you're changing lanes, you're looking around and still having a conversation with somebody. That is dual tasking.
Hmm.
Now, an athlete, the reasons why I want to work on dual tasking is because if they're in play, they have to think about not only themselves, but everybody else on the field. Where is my teammates? Where is, the ball? Where is,
Hmm.
where do I need to go with this? Where do I need to do with these things? So there's really no such thing as the dumb jock. There really hasn't been. There never will be. Because if you look at athletes, they're actually very, very smart. Now, it might not be book smart, but they are really, really good at movement smarts. if
Yeah.
you so whenever it comes to dual tasking, you can utilize different things. Like one of the things I normally do with people, this is one of my questionnaire things, is I evaluate people's gait. So I will literally watch people walk, and then I'll have them do dual tasking while walking because sometimes that'll actually tease some stuff out.
Mm.
So I normally give people two options when it comes to whenever I'm doing an evaluation on them. So like before the cerebellum test, I'll check their gait and make sure that everything's moving properly, or just if there's any areas that I see that we could possibly work on. And then I'll have them do either serial sevens, where they have to count back from 100 by sevens, which I have like nobody does. Like I think I can count on one hand how many people I've actually had do that. Or I have them do every other month out loud. So they would say January, they would think February, they would say March, they would think April, like so forth, all the way down as they're walking. So this way it kind of teases some stuff because a lot of times whenever I check gait, people are like, somebody's watching me. I have to be perfect. And it's like, hang on, relax,
Yeah.
walk normal, kind of thing.
Mm.
So it can actually kind of tease some stuff out. So when it comes to dual tasking, like I find it very, very important just for not only athletes, but individual, like everybody needs to be able to do dual tasking. So I've done stuff to where it's like, okay, like the one I did in the video, I think I had my wife say categories and I had to list things while holding a squat. So I was holding an isometric squat
Yeah.
and I was having to list different things.
Hmm.
Um, I have people think about like we've done hitting drills, like for baseball players, we have something called, I call it letter ball. And it's literally, we took baseballs, me and my old business partners, and we drew, like me and one of my other business partners would draw letters all over these bucket of balls. And what we did was we'd start off with, okay, whenever you hit the ball, you have to tell me the last letter that you saw. Okay, now that last letter that you saw, give me a word that starts with it. All right, now on top of that, instead of say you saw a B, you have to give me the letter before or after the letter that you saw. So
Mm.
it makes them have to think. So it's basically making a cognitive function out of a simple hitting drill.
Hmm.
So we've done, give me a girl's name, give me a guy's name, give me, your favorite, give me an animal that starts with that letter, kind of thing. So that way they're having to think while they're doing something else. Okay, what letter did I see? Okay, can I hit the ball? Okay, I've
Hmm.
hit the ball. Okay, what was that letter that I saw? What is a word that starts with that letter? Or what is the word or what is the letter before and or after that letter that I saw? Kind of
Hmm.
thing. I saw an M. I'm going to say N. I saw an N. I'm going to say O or M, kind of thing. So
So,
it's like constantly changing those things, those variables creates dual tasking. And then on top of that, it creates more of a cognitive function. So they're having to think while moving.
And does that translate to like increased electrical activity? There's motor going on. There's also cognitive. And I'm thinking back to that analogy, the Christmas tree getting lit up like in the brain, and it's going down the spinal cord and then shooting out to your limbs to facilitate movement. But does that like increase motor? Does that increase electrical activity in motor units and like
Mhm.
lead to greater contraction?
Yes, 100%.
Wow,
So
that's so fascinating.
we do, so a lot of the things that I do whenever I work with people is I do assess and reassess. So whenever we're working on something, I will assess something. If most of the time, if I do it, if I'm working with athletes, it's going to be probably like a strength test, like a muscle test. With general population, I probably have them do like a range of motion check. So like they might do like a forward fold, back bend, or some kind of range of motion. I've tested people's visual clarity, tested people's balance, and then we try something, and then I normally check their gait beforehand, and if I see their gait gets better, then I have no problem with them doing the reevaluation. So if I have somebody, say an athlete that wants to become stronger, understanding where does strength live in the brain, where does
Mhm.
speed live in the brain, where does stamina live in the brain. It is all in that 3 pounds of jelly that sits in your skull. That's wired. Like we're just basically one big nerve. Understand that. Like we have nerves that branch out and everything like that. But think of yourself as you're just one big nerve. Now, if that nerve is firing at optimal levels, a lot of things will happen. So I've had people get instantly stronger within a matter of give me 5 seconds, and I've gotten people stronger. I had a video talking about the neutral tongue position. There was a research article that came out in like, I think it was either 2012 from Brazil, and they proved that the neutral tongue position, they were able to increase somebody's leg extension by up to 30%. So just by putting your tongue in a different position, I got stronger. And I
Mm.
tested it. I have an isometric machine, like my dad built me, and I actually tested it on myself, and I improved by quite a bit just by
Wow.
holding the tongue position. So that's changing those inputs. Changing those inputs, it creates a better output. Strength
Yeah.
is an output. Speed is an output. All of these things are outputs.
Yeah.
So when people are sitting there going, I have all of these problems. I want to get bigger, faster, stronger. I want to be out of pain. I want to be out of stress. I want to be out of all of this stuff. They're saying output stuff.
Yeah.
They're saying like, oh, I noticed that I have lack of sensation on my left foot. They don't say those kinds of things. But if they want to get faster, do I think I want to look at their sensory system? Absolutely. Because
Mhm.
if their brain is more aware of their body, once again, threat goes down, performance goes up.
Yeah.
So like whenever it comes down to like working on stuff, it's always about what does the brain want? What does it want that day? Now, sometimes I've had people in the past where it could be one drill, one exercise or whatever works really, really great for them for the entire time I've worked with them. I've also had, people that I've worked with where it's just like, I have no idea what your brain wants every time I meet you. Every time I
Mhm.
see you, I have no idea. I have ideas that I want to work on, but then I go to it and I'm like, this is stupid. I just come in, we're gonna find something out,
Mhm.
kind of thing.
Could you talk a little bit about vagal tone? Like we have our nervous system, and there's really two states that can be triggered, right? There's the sympathetic, which is the alert phase, stress response if you stay there chronically. And then there's the parasympathetic that's kind of it brings us down, rest and digest, recovery. So could you talk about the importance of being able to hop into one and then jump into the other? And what are some methods that you use to kind of teleport between the two?
Yeah, absolutely. So if we look at the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system, so this is part of our autonomic nervous system. So autonomic basically saying like you don't have to think about it. So autonomic nervous system, think about like your breathing. Until I said that, you weren't thinking about your breathing. You're not thinking about your heart rate. You're not thinking about your blood pressure. You don't have to think about that. So if we look at the difference between sympathetic and parasympathetic, you said it best: fight, flight, or freeze, sympathetic; rest and digest for parasympathetic. Now, if we have a healthy autonomic nervous system, we should actually have an ebb and flow between the two. Because understanding whenever you move, like me is reaching over here to grab, say, my phone, that's sympathetics. This is sympathetics happening, kind of thing. Whenever I don't move, it's probably going to be more parasympathetic activations. Now, if we look at the actual brain structures that deal with sympathetic and parasympathetic tones, is we have to look at the brainstem. So what I said earlier about, the mesencephalon, the pons, the medulla, this is another reason why I like to go through a cranial nerve evaluation with people, is because I can see where areas that they might be having too much sympathetic tone on one side and not enough sympathetic tone on the other side. Because we have a sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system on our right as well as our left. So we have one on top of, we have one on one side, one on the other. So if we look at how to activate different areas of this, you have to understand brain regions. So if it's okay, I can go a little neuro here to kind of
Oh yeah.
understand it.
Oh yeah.
Um, so if we look at the sympathetics, so sympathetic tones, so this is basically just movement, like you're moving, like you're getting sympathetic activation to make the motion happen. It lives in the area of the brainstem called the IML, stands for intermedial lateral. It exists in the midbrain or the mesencephalon. Now, the parasympathetic, it's kind of a two-parter. The parasympathetic lives in an area called the PMRF, stands for pontomedullary reticular formation. Now, if we break that down, pons, reticular, or basically pontomedullary, so medulla, reticular formation. So reticular basically means like web light. There's a formation between the pons and medulla. Now, if I'm getting sympathetic activation on one side, most of the time, majority of the time, if you have a healthy autonomic nervous system, if I have a sympathetic tone on one side, I'm getting activation on one side. Parasympathetic is going to happen on the opposite side. So if we look at how the brain is wired, if I'm moving, we know it's the frontal lobe and the opposite side frontal lobe and the same side cerebellum that's making this motion. So sympathetics, there's only about 10% of the frontal lobe activation is making this hand move. The other 80 to 90% is firing down the same side PMRF to help with stability. So basically parasympathetic activation to help with stability while the sympathetics is happening over here. Now, if I have somebody who has, say, high blood pressure on their right side compared to their left, so they need more parasympathetic activation on their right side compared to their left. How could I possibly do that through that example I just said? If I need more PMRF activations, parasympathetic activation on this side, my right side, a way to do that is voluntary movement of the opposite side, so my left side. So if I have somebody that's saying like, oh, if I were to go back to that example of 10 reps here, I have to do 10 reps here. If they have basically more sympathetic activation on this side, and I need to get more parasympathetic activation on this side, I only want them to work out the other side of their body. Now, I might stack that with other like cranial nerves. So if we look at pons has cranial nerve 5, 6, 7, and 8. Medulla has 9, 10, 11, and 12 on that side. So I might stack movement on my left side with, say, maybe an inner ear drill, maybe a tongue exercise, maybe humming or gargling, or maybe having them smile on one side while getting those activating to where we get more PMRF activation to where we have more parasympathetic activation on this side, which calms down that sympathetic tone and gets you back into that ebb and flow of your autonomics.
Hmm.
So
That's
that's a
that's
very,
fascinating.
very intense kind of, it can go a lot more in depth, but for right now, I'll just keep it there.
My mind is still boggled. I'm still trying to process that. Wow, that's amazing. It really is like a puzzle, nervous system.
So like
Um,
think about like another thing our PMRF does, so that pontomedular reticular formation does, is it actually inhibits pain on that side. So sometimes going after the areas that are causing pain, you're lost. Because if they have a PMRF issue on that side, that part of the brainstem is not firing properly down that side, what's going to happen is, okay, if all movement eventually is coming from the contralateral cortex, so like sensory, all sensory inputs go to the contralateral cortex, the opposite side cortex except smell. That's the easiest way to memorize it.
okay.
If we look at if they are having Paris or they're having PMRF issues on this side, and you go to a physical therapist, a chiropractor, a whatever, don't get me wrong, they do great things. I'm not dissing any of those professions at all. They do amazing jobs. But if somebody is having a PMRF issue on their left, like their left shoulder is pain, but they're having it because, or the right shoulder has pain, but it's because of a PMRF issue. Now all of a sudden they're adding stim, they're adding movement, they're adding all sorts of things, which then in turn is firing the opposite side cortex,
Yeah.
which in turn fires down that PMRF on the opposite side.
Hmm.
So sometimes going after the other side of the body is the answer. I've
Yeah.
gotten people out of pain by having them legitimately move the opposite side of their body.
Yeah.
Like, so like that, these are things that like if we start getting intense, like in depth when it comes to the neurology of how movement occurs, this is like the avenue of where I hope the fitness, the wellness, fitness, performance industry is heading. And it's kind of getting there with the newest, latest research coming out, which I'm loving, kind of thing.
Yeah, that's so fascinating. Because I'm going into PT actually, but this is the whole reason I'm doing this because there's people like you out there who have this amazing information and you like know like you have this whole layer of the nervous system that doesn't really get taught that much or
Mhm.
explored that much in PT school from what I've heard. Um, but that's amazing.
Like,
Uh,
I would just tell you this, like, always keep an open mind. Like, in this profession, people that are closed mind when it comes to things, closed minded, they're not going to get far
mhm,
because the information is always constantly changing. Keeping up with the information is like priority number one, like
mhm.
crazy stuff kind of thing.
Yeah. I know some coaches do follow my account, so maybe they're listening right now. How do you disseminate information? Like what's your process? Like, are you on Google Scholar? Do you subscribe to any certain things? But like you were saying, keeping up the latest research, what's your process for just filtering through and just extracting what
Yeah, absolutely.
the
Like,
stuff?
what I recommend is a lot of books, a lot of neuro heavy books. There's some great authors out there. I can give you some names like the books that I always recommend is The Brain That Changes Itself. It's basically about neuroplasticity. I recommend a book called Explain Pain, which is by some people that are the leading, it's by David Butler and Mosley, who are like the leading pain development. Yes, that book right there.
Yeah, this
Uh,
book's crazy.
there's one called Explain Pain that I think it's they're leading research in pain in Australia by David Butler and Mosley. They do a great job. They have two different versions of the book. I recommend the base version. Do not get the supercharged because it's super like neuro heavy. Because like the regular explain page, they would basically say something and they kind of dumb it down to where you can understand it, like so where you can go back and reread it, like, oh, that makes sense now. To where it's the supercharged, they're like, we're just giving you the actual knowledge, you can digest it, kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah.
Another good one is if you have some kind of subject that you want to, like, say you want to look at the visual system or the vestibular system, you can go into Google Scholar, type in visual system balance, visual system stability, visual system pain, and it'll pull up all sorts of information that you can go back, you can basically go into and read basically the information that's actually coming out. Um, but the stuff that I get a lot of my information is a lot of the certifications I have. They're constantly
Hmm.
updating their stuff and they put new research articles that we can look up and all sorts of things like that.
Hmm.
Uh, they've been amazing when it comes to keeping the information relatively new. And by relatively new, I mean like a couple years old, maybe a year old, maybe even like some stuff that's come out this year. They have put into publication to where we can go in to our accounts, our dashboard, and actually look up these things.
Hmm.
Um,
That's awesome.
yeah, so it's been like, and like if anybody normally asks me about stuff, I normally steer them into the right direction. I'm like, have you done to Google Scholar and type in this? I just did. I found 3 research articles proving what I'm saying in my post or whatever. Um, but a lot of times, like for me to get my point across is with my clients and things, I have them, like I give them the ability to see it for themselves instead of saying like, oh, there's this research, trying to prove all these things. I'm like, okay, we assess something. tried something out, and now you reassessed better. You see that you got better. You feel
Yeah.
better. You're moving better. You're seeing all these results with a matter of a few seconds because our nervous system fires at, 300 miles an hour. So if we know something, it'll happen immediately.
Hmm.
So for that to happen, it's like I show them that these are the reasons why. Like, okay, you saw that you got better. Now start doing those for homework.
Hmm.
There's no excuse for you to not want to make yourself better, kind of thing.
Yeah, that's awesome. Um, so so we talked about stacking and exploring and playing. But what would you advise young athletes to do to implement into their training in order to maximize their athletic potential and their brains? Essentially, it's the same thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Um, the best way that I would tell athletes, honestly, if they want to take their performance to the next level, is understand that we have three movement systems. We have, every human body needs to be able to do four things. That is see well, balance well, move well, and then most importantly, integrate those three things well. So if you're an athlete and you play whatever sport, like if you want to get better, explore movement. How can I make myself better? Can I try it in a different eye position, a different head position? Can I try it in that, like the stuff that I was telling you whenever it comes to me training myself? Is it's
Yeah.
all about building trust with your brain. At the end of the day, that's literally what it is. Like if you broke it down, what I do for a living is help people build better habits. Like that's legitimately it. Um, so if we look at for athletic development, I have my athletes, do I have them think about, okay, if I'm working with, somebody and I go, okay, I know your sport has a lot of rotation into it or whatever this, I'm like, okay, where are your eyes whenever you're normally doing those rotations? All right, whenever we do this exercise, where should your eyes be? All right, now I want you to think about these things on top of that. Let's integrate those three movement systems together. Like if I'm working with baseball players, especially with hitting drills or hitting exercises, I'm like, okay, if we're doing a med ball, hip throw into a wall, just working on the hip, power, I'm like, where is your eyes whenever you go to swing a barrel of a bat? I'm like, put your eyes in the same position. Your eyes should not be looking down at the floor or looking up at the sky or looking straight ahead. We don't live in a world where we're constantly going forward and back and up and down, and that's it. So why don't we train
Yeah.
like that?
Yeah. Yeah.
So like what I tell athletes, like a lot of times, like my job as a, movement guy is I don't really do anything like, yes, the stuff I've kind of talked to you about, it's like, it sounds pretty intense, but if you were to see me in an actual training session, like, it's not like anything like you're gonna be like, oh my gosh, it's just like, okay, he's just really, really in tune with how to move. Like, that's really all it is. It's just getting people to understand how to move at a better capacity at the end of the day.
Hmm.
Now, is there cool ways to get there faster? Yes, let's look at the visual system. Let's look at the vestibular system. Let's look at, okay, let's mobilize your ankle this way. Let's mobilize your hand this way. Let's do all these things to make those things better. But at the end of the day, I just teach people how to move. If they are professional athletes or if they are weekend warriors, all right, let's
Hmm.
just make sure that you're moving properly.
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome. So we've kind of dove into more of the athletic and elite side of things. But in this country, neurodegenerative disease is something many Americans face. So how can we cultivate healthy practices to prevent neurodegeneration and keep our wits late into life?
Mhm. Absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
there was actually like this is gonna sound weird, but like 2020 was like a great year for research. Like scientists had nothing better to do but like do research. So, like there was a lot of publications that came out. But with like neurodegenerative diseases, a lot of times like I'm not going to sugarcoat it. People have to be willing to put in the work because if we're already having something that's causing our nerves to kind of leave or die out or whatever, you're going to have to almost do double the work in order to keep those things alive and then grow them on. So like the neuroplasticity, like I always tell people whenever I teach them something new, I'm like, the first like 1,000 reps, you're going to have to think about everything step by step by step by step, unfortunately. Then we start going to more of the cognitive to where it's like, okay, upper body, lower body. And then we go into the autonomic where it's like, and that's around 10,000 reps. And then 100,000 reps, we go just do it kind of thing. So if we're looking at somebody that says that's having, some neurodegenerative stuff, I've worked with people that have had Parkinson's, PTSD, stroke, all sorts of things. Have I had, people that have had huge success? But yes, absolutely, within our sessions. And then the stuff that we work on our sessions, I'm like, guess what you're doing for homework? Here's all of the things that you have to do for your homework. I've literally worked with somebody back in the day when I lived in Texas who legitimately had a stroke on one side of his brain, had a hemorrhage on that same side, almost killing that entire cortex out. Now, thank goodness his wife was, I do believe she was an ex-nurse, and she told me that not only coming to see me, twice a week, they were also doing about 8 hours of rehabilitation for him almost every single day. But for him, that's what he needed. So when it comes down to like how motivated people are, like you have to think about like neurodegeneration is a problem nowadays, obviously with the growing population, but you have to be willing to do the work in order to make it happen. Like my dad, for example, is a type 1 diabetic. So he's having some neuropathy of his feet a little bit. I told him, Dad, I want you to go barefoot on the carpet and I want you to scuff your feet. Just getting that sensory stim, because if he's losing sensation, he needs to activate those nerve endings to keep those things alive. So a lot of times, whenever it comes to neurodegenerative diseases, you'll notice nerves will, whenever they're dying out, they become hypersensitive because they want to be activated. They want to be stimulated. Like they're like, look at me, look at me, look at me. And if you don't pay attention to them, then they eventually die out. So like my dad, for example, has very, very sensitive feet. Like you touch it, he's like, oh, get away, get away.
Oh,
So for him, Dad, I want you to work on just sensations of your feet. Like just go on the carpet and scuff your feet. And then he bought a foot massager. And I'm like, Dad, that's great. And he's in it quite a bit doing stuff. But the thing is, though, when it comes to these kind of diseases and stuff like that, it's like the individual has to be motivated to put in the work. It's a pain. I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. When it comes to
yeah.
stuff like that, like I've gotten, pretty intense with people sometimes that I've worked with, like they have to do the work. If you want to keep the function of your hand, of your foot, your arm, whatever, you have to put the time in. You have to do the work. I'm sorry, this is sometimes the only way is the hard way,
Mhm.
unfortunately,
What about
kind of
some
thing.
other aspects of brain health? I know when you were demonstrating that drill and you said when it gets a little twitchy, you might start incorporating some endurance. But what are some other things like that, maybe nutritionally or uh,
Yeah.
mitigating stressor wise that could help?
Yeah, a lot of times like I normally start people off with a lot of breathing
Mm,
because our brain needs two things, and that is fuel and activation. Now, out of the fuel part, that is glucose, which is basically a broken down carbohydrate molecule,
mhm,
as well as oxygen. Now, oxygen is kind of like a two-parter. It's oxygen and CO2. So, like one of my questions in my questionnaire is, have you ever suffered a concussion? Like you ever had a hit in the head, a concussion, anything like that? And if they say yes to that, I'm immediately in my head, immediately going, we're going to work on CO2 stuff. People always think, like when it comes to stuff that if you want to improve areas of the brain, you have to think of oxygen being a two-parter. You have O2 and then you have CO2. So for me, whenever like people want to improve cerebellar function, I normally look at their breathing immediately right off the bat. Because if we had somebody that's had a concussion, I've had people that have had not had a concussion still worked on breathing and they've had amazing reassessment. So like I will literally use this exercise or whatever exercise I want with them, like a cerebellum exercise, as a reassessment. So I've had people work on breathing. Breathing's huge. Like if you wanted to work on one thing that's going to benefit brain health, like breathing is right up there.
yeah.
It's a big one because we
It,
breathe 20 to 25,000 times a
yeah.
day. Like
Yeah.
it can be a huge, huge impact in a matter of very, very short periods of time,
Hmm.
kind of thing. So,
Yeah.
like a lot of times when it comes to overall brain health, I'm looking at breathing. I'm looking at different regions of the brain. So, I want to look at your visual system. How do your eyes move? I want to look at your inner ear because we want to make sure that you know which way, where you're going and which way is up. Like our vestibular system, our inner ear, does so much for us more than what we might actually think. It is a remarkable organ, a remarkable system. It's unbelievable what it actually does for us, and we take it for granted. Like we don't think about it. We don't think about training it until somebody's like, "Oh, I'm starting to get vertigo," or "I have motion sickness." "Oh, I want to think about my inner ear might be the problem." No, your strength might be because your horizontal canal on your left vestibular system is not firing right, or your utricle of your otolith organ is not properly firing at a optimal level. That's the reason why you possibly could have, unnatural curvature of the spine. Like that's how in tuned like our vestibular system is with the midline of our body. It does unbelievable things for us. Our eyes do unbelievable things for us, and we take them for such granted. Like
Yeah.
remember I told you like I like to look at the sensory system. Like sensory, if you look at the mapping of our brain, sensory comes before motor. So if I'm looking at your eyes, understanding that around 70 to 90% of all sensory inputs, so inputs, interpretation, outputs, 70 to 90% of that is coming from our eyes alone, just in the inputs area.
Mhm.
So we can look at your eyes and all of a sudden it's like, oh, you're out of pain. Oh, you're
Yeah.
moving. Oh, you can jump higher. Oh, you can bench press. Now you went from 225. Now you're benching 250 in a matter of 5 seconds. Like that's how the nervous system works.
Yeah.
Like it's bizarre. Like it's kind of funny because like I've been doing this for so long that it's the norm for me.
Yeah.
But whenever I introduce it to people, they're like, "This is crazy," and I'm like, it's just it's neurology. So by
Hmm.
moving, at the end of the day, like you said at the beginning, like we are all neurologists, whether we know it or not. Are you moving throughout the world? Yes, you're a neurologist. You might
Yeah.
not be able to tell you the brain regions that are causing those things, but yet you are moving. So yet you are technically a neurologist
Hmm.
kind of thing.
Yeah. That's so fascinating. And definitely stuff I'm gonna take with me as I pursue this whole PT thing, because
Mhm.
like you said, we're practicing whether we realize it or not. And I'm trying to know what I'm doing, so I'm not messing people
Like
up.
like put it this way, like Pete, like if you're going into PT school, listen to your instructor, get the piece of paper, get the doctorate, like do all that stuff. But whenever you come out, understanding that there's a whole new ball game. Like I've had the fortune of meeting some pretty intense people over my, 10 plus years of doing this. Like I literally met a lady, what was it, a couple months ago? She's like a neurophysical therapist, and she specializes in some crazy stuff. And it's just like, holy crap, like I thought I knew some stuff, like Jesus. Um,
Yeah.
and like thinking about that, like you're gonna meet some pretty intense people whenever you get out of school and while you are in school. But as always think about this, like never be closed-minded. Never think that you know everything.
Yeah.
You're gonna turn the corner, and next thing you know, you're gonna find all of this new information of basically over one subject that you're like, what the hell? Where was this in school? Kind of thing.
Hmm. Yeah. That's awesome. Um, so thank you. I appreciate it. That was an awesome talk. You have so much information and seem so passionate about what you do. So just thank you. And I think you brought a lot of value to all the viewers. Can you let the people know where they can find you and what
Oh
stuff you're
yeah.
working on? And
Yeah, absolutely. We are. So if you can go to my website or my Instagram page, whatever, I'm at the barrettmethod.com is my website. You can kind of look me up and kind of see like an idea of stuff that I do. I offer some stuff that you can purchase on my website is I have a nutritional program. I don't want to say program, but a nutritional guideline. And it's kind of looking at eating through a neural lens. And in this ebook, you literally learn how to not only have a different aspect on what to eat when it comes from a brain-based kind of perspective, but also how to test your autonomics in order to figure out what foods actually work best for your gut, your nervous system, and all those kinds of things. And then on top of that, I also offer my six foundational speed and agility steps. And this is what I teach every athlete that comes to me for speed and agility work. These are the first things that we are working on because this sets a great foundation for us to build off of. Those are the two things that I have up on there. And then I do offer online training as well as in person if you are in the Colorado area kind of thing. But I normally do online stuff. I've worked with, people all over the world, it seems like at this point, kind of thing. So yeah.
Awesome. Appreciate you, Barrett.
No
And if
problem.
you're in Colorado, go see him. He'll help you out.